Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Samson. One of the decisions that kinda keeps coming up on the early floors is how to use your consumables, and I think this decision was pretty interesting because we had two bombs, we had a reroll machine and no tinted rocks. If there were any tinted rocks on the floor, I think that's probably the easiest decision of my life. I would always bomb the tinted rock because it basically guarantees your chance of getting a spirit heart, and that again in turn guarantees your chance of getting that devil deal on the first floor. Of course, sometimes you can get a golden chest, but I think that's offset by the fact that you can sometimes also get small rock. So tinted rock is probably the best decision if we have any sparing bombs on the first floor. But in this particular case, we didn't have any tinted rocks, but we did have two bombs, a reroll machine with one item in it, and of course some potential secret rooms and second secret rooms. Because the floor was relatively small, I think we could pinpoint maybe to a 50% accuracy of where the secret room is, so that means if it did miss one, we would probably have still a good chance to find it with the other bomb. So there's a decision to be made. Should we just take an item, because we still get an item by picking it up, and then use our bombs to maybe try to get a bit more consumables, or should we maybe try to reroll it twice in hopes of maybe getting a super good item? I think that there's probably a balance in there somewhere. In this case I decided to go for two rerolls just because the items that we got weren't that good, but I definitely think that maybe making a compromise by trying to find a secret room once and then re-rolling the machine once is a good idea, because I think that kind of captures the balance between the exploration bonus that you get, and also you have to remember that secret rooms not only contain other consumables, but they can also contain items in some situations which can really kind of help you break the run. So I think in that position is to kind of try to maximize your chances of getting the best payout is probably just to use one particular bomb on the secret room, and if you do find it, that's great, but if you don't find it, then maybe kind of wager your chances on whatever you think the item in the treasure room is worth picking up, or maybe if it's better than any other random item. One thing that I did touch a bit in my previous videos is that the treasure room just has a ton of items. I think it has the most items out of any item pools, which also means that it has the most worst items. So the difference between rerolling once and rerolling twice actually isn't that high, at least in terms of increasing your chances of getting a better item. Sure, you know, theoretically, because you have two bombs as opposed to one, you have twice as many, it's twice as likely that you're actually gonna get a good item. But in this case, just because there's so many bad items that you really don't want to pick up, I would say that rerolling twice as opposed to once isn't really that big of a benefit. But still, you know, like I said, I think that's an interesting decision and this interesting conundrum, and I definitely think it could be solved mathematically by maybe looking at the payouts of the secret rooms and maybe kind of balancing or maybe determining how much valuable they are, and of course then seeing which items you could potentially get out of the item rooms. I definitely think that there's some maybe incentive to go for the item room, maybe rerolling it twice, just because in this game, even if you get a really good item, that essentially means that you won the run, and I think that those edge cases really do make it worthwhile for you to just kind of keep rerolling. Nevertheless, this was maybe a bit enough about math and statistics. We have arrived at probably the breaking point of this run. Up until this point it wasn't too terrible, just because we're Samson, we can kind of use our passive ability to damage ourselves in the curse rooms, maybe the blood banks and things like that, to increase our damage, and that made things relatively simple up until this point. I did spend some time on actually playing the blood banks and just overall sacrificing my health to get the damage up, so that kind of cost me a bit of time, but thankfully with this devil deal I think that we can make up for it. Of course, getting Brimstone is just a great offensive potential, combined with Serpent's Kiss. That essentially means that we have infinite health, which also come in handy, just because if we do find a sacrifice room, that means we also always have some spirit hearts laying around that we can use to sacrifice our health in hopes of getting to the dark room. And of course we found the shovel, which is great because on the floor it goes to Mom's heart. Having a shovel basically guarantees that you can go one floor deeper and of course get more points that way. A few things that can happen if you go to the Mom's Heart, and if you only have one AWAS rune, sometimes you can get a crawl space, and I think the chances of that are like 7%, but not too long ago I had a daily where two AWAS runes actually gave me both crawl spaces, and I believe I read that even the third rune in that particular daily gave you a crawl space again, so that's just incredibly unlikely, but again, it can happen, so I think it's always better to have the shovel, because with the shovel, essentially you have like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 charges, so you're basically guaranteed to get the opening to go one floor deeper, so to shovel. And thankfully in this particular daily we also had the sacrifice room in the shovel, which also allowed us to go to the dark room. At a certain point I believed that if you go to shovel just naturally, it's not worth it to go to the dark room, or if you go to the cathedral, just because the points you lose by actually sacrificing yourself are much less than you get by actually beating the floor. But just kind of from observation, I would say that that's not true, just because up until this point, every time I actually did that, I got more points by just going to the dark room. And of course, when you actually go to the dark room, you still have the whole floor left to beat. And at the end, because you beat the lamp, you also get the lamp bonus, which I believe is like 5,000 points. And that's just much greater than you would get for beating Mega Satan or just regular Satan or Isaac, because I think those bosses don't give you any score bonuses in that regard. So I think it's always better to go to the dark room if you can, of course, afford the health to go and do so. I would also like to do some math at a certain point to see if maybe it's worth it to sacrifice your health at 11 hearts to go to the dark room, because I think just because there's, I think, twice of 20% chances of getting some spirit hearts out of it, it might even be good to try and sacrifice your health at 10 spirit hearts to try to get to the dark room. I always say if you want to go to the dark room, it's always good obviously to have 12 full hearts and then have some spirit hearts laying around just to kind of maximize your chances of going there. But I definitely, again, there's some interesting math to be done here. I definitely didn't go as deep into it as I probably should have, but then again, you know, these dailies are about maybe more for me having fun and trying to compete in a competitive environment than just trying to maybe analyze the game a bit too much, because I definitely think if you focus on the minute details, like is it good to sacrifice your health at 10 spirit hearts or 11 spirit hearts, maybe there's a breaking point there. While that is probably good for optimal play and just getting a lot of score in the long run, I definitely think it's the least of fun options. I would say that sometimes when I feel right, I would try to sacrifice my health with 10 hearts and 11 hearts, and I definitely remember doing that in the past, and I did capture it on video. But I definitely wouldn't recommend it. But now, you know, if you feel like it, maybe you get lucky and you get a lot of spirit hearts out of the sacrifice room, and maybe via that way you can then afford to go to the dark room, and maybe that's the seam you find in that particular daily, which does bring you in the top 10 or whatever score you're aiming for. We also, with Afterbirth, you know, there was a severe lack of synergies, in my opinion, in Rebirth when that came out. But in Afterbirth, a lot of the synergies have been either patched or kind of mended by. There's still no true synergies with some items, but at least a lot of the items don't override each other. I can't tell you how bad it felt by picking up two items that necessarily didn't really work together, just to have one item disappear and then you're stuck with the other one, which is maybe inferior. Thankfully, in Afterbirth, I believe that all of the items, or just like 99% of the items, work together in some way, or at least don't override each other. And definitely one of the best synergies that came out of it was Epic Fetus and Brimstone. And you can see every time Epic Fetus, the rocket drops on the ground, we shoot Brimstone lasers just kind of around it. And with the Snake Worm trinket, it's a very pretty effect. I really enjoy it. One thing that's really great about this is even though our damage is relatively low, it's quite hard to actually aim these laser Brimstone beams. Just because if you actually hit your target dead center, that means that that target is going to get hit by at least 8 or maybe 6 or whatever Brimstones that are there, and that kind of multiplies their damage by however much you have. You can see that our damage is only 7, which is not too terribly high for this stage of the game, but just due to how Brimstone works, that's just plenty enough, and especially with Epic Fetus that shoots out 8 Brimstones, that's plenty enough to actually get us kind of carried to the game. And I believe we can one-shot most bosses. I definitely didn't one-shot the Lamb, but I think I one-shot Mom's Heart, and we'll see that just in a few seconds. Another MVP of this particular daily was definitely the Tarot Cloth, and the Tarot Cloth is a new item in Afterbirth Plus. I never really did have a chance to talk about it, but it's just a solid item. It's one of those shop items that you find, and you're just always happy to pick it up, like Sackboy for example, just because you know it's gonna give you so many benefits. And Tarot Cloth essentially doubles every single usage of a card or a rune I believe you have, and just gives you a double effect. So that means if you have a Yarrow rune and you use it with Tarot Cloth, you essentially use the Yarrow rune twice, essentially quadrupling every single consumable in the room. And that's just great for dailies where you find a Yarrow rune, but maybe you don't necessarily find the blank card, which allows you to use it infinitely many amount of times, if you have a battery, of course. But it's also good for things like maybe the 2 of clubs, for 2 of spades, 2 of diamonds, and that's definitely something that's quite useful in this particular case, because we have 25 bombs. At first I even forgot that I had Tarot Cloth, so what I did is I actually used the Yarrow rune on the 2 of clubs, and that gave me 4 2 of clubs cards, and that was okay. Like, maybe that's a bit too many, but at least I'll have enough bombs. But then I used just 1 2 of clubs, and because it essentially quadruples your consumables, I got from 28 bombs to 99 with just 1 usage of the card. So that was maybe a bit of an overkill, but obviously in this situation it did work out pretty well. But I also got a bunch of bolts of steel pills by doing that play, so that was good, because then of course I have some buffers of hearts which I can then use and trade in the sacrifice room, just in case, of course, if it did get a bit too low, if the sacrifice room didn't give us any other spirit hearts, we could use the balls of steel pills to just kind of regenerate our health and be just a bit more safe when we actually travel to the dark room. Thankfully, all went well just because we did have this kind of an overpowered combo, and I believe this is one of those dailies where you will find this combo no matter what. In my case, I did get the deal with the devil on the second floor, and in the third floor, I believe I teleported to the angel room where I got the angel which rotates around me. And I believe even if you did miss the devil deal on the second floor, on the third floor you get the goat head, which then gives you the devil floor on the fourth floor, which means that you can basically miss the shovel and the brimstone beam. So in this case, this daily is actually quite equal for everyone, and I'm really glad whenever that happens, even maybe if pets do branch somewhat, just due to nature of the items that you get, it kind of balances out, and everybody basically has the same chance of getting this amazing combination of items, which kind of carries you through the whole run. Overall, I definitely did try a bit hard on this particular daily, just because a few of my previous dailies were, I would say, a bit poor, maybe not the best ones, and I definitely felt like there's some pressure on me, maybe not pressure, but just more like internal pride that I had to complete and just get a really good daily in there, and thankfully this was definitely one of them. I believe I played well, I didn't take a lot of damage, I did get quite a lot of consumables, and just getting 40,000 points on a run that goes to Mom's Heart originally, I believe is great. And in this case, I think I finished in the top 10 on the Greedbot leaderboard, so that's of course after you weed out the cheaters, and because it's quite late in the day when I play this daily, I'm kind of confident that I will finish at least in the top 20, if not in the top 10 by tomorrow. Of course, our damage penalty is high in this case, even though I said I didn't get hit much, just because we did go to the sacrifice room, and obviously that does ramp up your damage penalty quite significantly, but all of the other stats actually look quite solid. Of course, my internal struggle is finding those breaking runs, or maybe not even finding them, just kind of abusing them, because I think it's quite a boring mechanic, and I'm not the type of person to really kind of sit back and just explore and try to mine every single rock to find the combinations of items which will get me a lot of points. So maybe for that reason my Shrek bonus or maybe my daily performance wasn't as good, but nevertheless I'm satisfied with how this particular one turned out. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.